In American history, few events are as infamous or as misunderstood as the Salem Witch Trials of 1692 and 1693. It's a tale that has everything: accusations of witchcraft, hysteria sweeping through a Puritan community, dramatic court proceedings, and the execution of 20 innocent people. The events that unfolded in Salem Village and Salemtown, Massachusetts have become a cautionary tale about the dangers of superstition and unchecked accusations. Well, what if I told you the story you think you know, the one that's been dramatized in countless books, plays, and films, only scratches the surface of a much more complex and troubling reality? We need to start at the beginning. In January 1692, two young girls in Salem Village, Abigail Williams and Betty Paris, began experiencing strange fits. They screamed, threw things, uttered peculiar sounds, and contorted their bodies into unusual positions. A local doctor, unable to find a medical explanation, suggested the girls might be under the influence of witchcraft. Now pause here and consider the context. This was Puritan New England, where beliefs in the supernatural was not just common, but an integral part of the worldview. And the idea that witches could harm was not seen as superstition, but as a very real and present danger. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of this being an isolated incident, accusations of witchcraft spread like wildfire. By March, dozens of people had been accused, arrested, and imprisoned. So what turned a case of two troubled girls into a full-blown witch hunt that would ultimately claim 20 lives? To answer this, we need to dig deeper into the social, economic, and political landscape of 17th century Salem. First, let's consider the community itself. Salem Village was not the unified Puritan settlement we might imagine. It was a community riven with factions, largely divided between the wealthy Porter family and their allies, who were connected to the prosperous Salem town, and the poor Putnam family, who sought independence for the village. And this division is crucial to understand the witch trials. Many of the early accusations came from members of the Putnam family and were directed at their rivals or at marginalized members of the community. In other words, the witch hunt became a way to settle old scores and shift the balance of power. But that's not the whole story. We also need to consider the broader context of New England in the late 17th century. This was a time of great upheaval. The charter of the Massachusetts Bay Colony had recently been revoked, creating political uncertainty. There was ongoing conflict with Native American tribes. A smallpox epidemic had ravaged the region. In short, it was a perfect storm of conditions to create a sense of vulnerability and fear. Now let's turn and look at the accused themselves. While popular depictions often focus on the idea of marginalized women being targeted, the reality was more complex. Yes, the majority of the accused were women, but men were also targeted. And the accused ranged from the very poor to the relatively wealthy, from socially outcast to respected community members. One of the most famous victims, Rebecca Nurse, was a pious, well-respected 71-year-old woman. Her accusation and execution showed that no one was safe once the accusations began to fly. But why would anyone accuse a respected elder of witchcraft? And we need to consider the power of groupthink and the psychology of moral panics. Once the idea of witches in the community took hold, it created a lens through which people interpreted all manner of ordinary events and long-standing grievances. A neighbor's ill fortune could be attributed to a curse. An old quarrel could be recast as evidence of witchcraft. Moreover, the court proceedings themselves were designed to elicit confessions and further accusations. The accused were encouraged to name other witches to save themselves. This created a snowball effect, with each new accusation lending credence to the whole affair and implicating more people. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the Salem Witch Trials was the use of spectral evidence. This was testimony that the accused person's spirit or spectral shape appeared to the witness in a dream or vision. In essence, it allowed accusations based purely on imagination and unprovable claims. The admission of spectral evidence was controversial, even at the time. Increase Mather, a prominent Puritan minister, argued against its use, stating that it were better that 10 suspected witches should escape than the one innocent person should be condemned. Despite such voices of reason, the trials continued, driven by a perfect form of factors, genuine belief in witchcraft, community tensions, and the self-perpetuating nature of the accusations. Now consider the role of the young girls at the center. Traditional narratives often portray them as either genuine victims of a mass delusion or as malicious schemers. The reality is likely more complex. These girls, living in a repressive Puritan society, suddenly found themselves at the center of attention. Their words carried weight. Adults hung on their every statement. Is it any wonder that the accusations might have taken on a life of their own? And it's not to say that the girls were consciously lying. The power of suggestion, especially in a highly charged emotional environment, can lead people to genuinely believe in false memories or misinterpreted events. It's a phenomenon well documented in modern psychology. But the girls weren't operating in a vacuum. They were part of a broader social and legal system that gave credence to their accusations and perpetuated the witch hunt. And this brings us to one of the most troubling aspects of the Salem Witch Trials, the role of the legal system. The courts, rather than serving as a check on the hysteria, became its primary engine. The judges, including the infamous John Hawthorne, the ancestor of novelist Nathaniel Hawthorne, seemed more interested in obtaining confessions than in determining the truth. The trial procedures were heavily skewed against the accused. Those who maintained their innocence were seen as unrepentant and were more likely to be executed. Those who confessed might save their lives but would lose their property and standing in the community. In many ways, there was no win. So how did it all end? In October 1692, Governor William Phips dissolved the court that had been conducting the trials, largely due to increased skepticism about the proceedings, including the use of spectral evidence. The last executions took place in September of that year. But here's the twist. Even after the trials ended, the repercussions continued. Many of those who had been accused, but not executed, found themselves social outcasts. Families torn apart. The community of Salem would take decades to recover from the trauma. So where does this leave us? Were the Salem Witch Trials simply a case of mass hysteria? Were they a deliberate ploy by some community members to target their rivals? Or were they a perfect storm of social, psychological, and legal factors that created a self-perpetuating cycle of accusation and persecution? The reality, as is often the case, likely involves elements of all these explanations. There was undoubtedly a degree of mass hysteria involved. There's evidence of personal vendettas playing a role in some accusations, and the legal and social structure in place allowed the trials to continue far longer than they should have. But in focusing solely on the question of whether the accusers truly believed in witchcraft or were deliberately lying, we risk missing the larger, more intriguing story. This is a tale about the dangers of unchecked power, the way fear can warp a community's judgment, and the importance of due process and skepticism in the face of extraordinary claims. The Salem Witch Trials challenge us to think critically about how we respond to perceived threats, especially those that align with our pre-existing beliefs or biases. They invite us to consider how easily justice can be perverted when due process is abandoned in the face of moral panic. And perhaps the most valuable lesson we can take from the Salem Witch Trials is this: in times of social upheaval and uncertainty, we must be especially vigilant against the demonization of individuals or groups. We must question narratives that seem too convenient to align with existing power struggles or long-standing grudges. The real witchcraft at play in Salem was not supernatural magic, but the dark alchemy of fear, power, and groupthink. It's a form of witchcraft that requires no spells or pacts with the devil, but which can be just as destructive. And as we reflect on the tragic events in Salem, we're left with a sobering realization. The mechanisms that allowed the witch hunt to unfold are not relics of a superstitious past, but potential pitfalls in any society. The tendency to seek scapegoats in times of crisis, the ability of those in power to manipulate public fear, the dangers of abandoning due process in the name of security. These are challenges we continue to grapple with today. In the end, the story of the Salem Witch Trials is not just about historical injustice. It's about the ongoing challenge of maintaining critical thinking, individual rights, and fair judicial processes in the face of public panic and political expediency. It's a reminder that the most dangerous incantations are not curses or evil spells, but unchecked fear and the willingness to abandon reason in the face of perceived threats. As we navigate our own era of political polarization, social media-fueled panics, and renewed debates about the balance between security and liberty, the lessons of Salem remain chillingly relevant. The challenge, as always, is to resist the allure of easy answers and convenient scapegoats. We must strive to be, in Arthur Miller's words from his Salem-inspired play, The Crucible, the one man still with enough of his wits about him to doubt when faced with a chorus of accusation and fear.